Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears, your multi-dimensional array of disappointment. We're back here with the Prelude for the 4th week. However, this time, things are starting to get exciting again. So I've actually done a whole lot of work on this car, and we are finally on the downhill. So last week, we finished up the timing belt. We finished the back half of the hose circuit for the main coolant line. I've also done almost all of the power steering hoses. Now, there's still a lot of work ahead of me, and the scary part with these types of projects is that one thing that you might have missed, or that one thing that doesn't quite feel right. Of course, when you do a whole lot of work, that can be a lot of things, and a lot of things that can contribute to starting up this car and ending up in total disaster. What if I got the timing off? What if something fell into the oil pan? What if, and just the list just goes on and on and on. There's a whole number of things that can go wrong. Most of them have already happened to me at one point or another, so I am really hopeful that I'm going to get, I don't know, lucky this time. I don't know if you even can call that luck at this point. But I digress. Let's go handheld so I can show you what I got going on. So you remember those power steering hoses that I was procrastinating this entire project? I finally pulled them. It actually wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. However, my issue was never with removing them. It was always with reinstalling them. So I think I'm getting to the hard part right now. We'll see. The other reason that concerns me is, you see this little guy right here? Yeah, well, I don't have that. That doesn't exist. So I had to get basically 4 feet of this, and hopefully I'll be able to loop in that circuit. Worst case scenario is that I just delete the hard line that this thing goes through before going into the oil cooler. That's always an option. See this hard line right there, right in the center of focus right there. It runs down. It's probably about, I don't know, 10 inches or 14 inches. And it just connects to the input of the reservoir. So I might have to just delete that, replace it with zip ties, but if I have to, I will. Moving on, we've got most of everything kind of buttoned up underneath the manifold. I'm still waiting on 2 of those little insulators for the fuel rail. I found 2, but it turns out I was missing 2. So I guess I lost half of the ones I needed. So I managed to get everything else cleaned up there. I also got some paint on the brake booster. It's not all that good, but eventually I'll have to pop it off someday anyway, and there'll be another opportunity for that. I've got the EGR hooked back up to the manifold and to the pipe that runs out to the exhaust. And all that crap is bolted up to the back of the intake manifold. And then beyond that, we've already seen underneath the car, everything's all buttoned up except for those 3 bolts for the downpipe into the catalytic converter. So I'll probably forget about. Up here, I have finished, all 4 of the motor mounts are on. So this car is ready to go as far as that's concerned. I also added some tape to the starter power wire because it was starting to get exposed. So next, after I install those power steering lines, I'm going to reinstall the radiator and start to get this assembly back together. I can put the water pipe on with all of the little temperature sensors and the connect all the hoses to that. And then after that, I can put the distributor and cam angle sensor in. And at that point, I'm pretty much stuck until I get the fuel rail. That will be kind of the last thing left in place, aside from the throttle cable and the speed sensor. Well, the goodish news is that I got this power steering line replaced. You may notice that I have a zip tie down there. Where are you? There you are. I have a zip tie down there, and that's because the lines that I replaced were a little bit longer, because making them the exact same length would have driven me insane. And that is because the hose ends right there. So I needed a little bit extra room to connect things with the oil cooler out of the car, and a little bit extra room to maneuver this snake around the side of the engine bay. And this just ended up dangling a little close to the AC compressor. So I decided to just zip tie it back. I may add a second one up here or something just to be safe, but it's not really a concern anymore. The other line, the return line, I was able to connect it to this hard line. It wasn't easy, but it was possible, mostly because I was able to reach my hand down here and get an angle upward. The line is also not quite round. It's an approximation of round, because it was at the end of the spool at AutoZone. So I'm hoping that doesn't really cause any restriction problems. I don't think it will. I think it'll just pop right out as soon as the system gets pressurized with fluid. You know, when things go so consistently wrong for so long, you can't help but to laugh. Yeah, I'm there. That's where I'm at right now. It's like that scene from The Money Pit where the bathtub falls through the floor while Tom Hanks is filling it, comes crashing down on the floor below it. That's kind of the level of amusement I'm at right now. Tell me, someone, leave a comment. Tell me how this makes sense. Tell me why this is not completely stupid. So I have to push this into the stupid T-junction, which, by the way, moves. And then once I finally get this in after 6 hours of struggling, I have to come back here and see this gasket hanging here, this O-ring that's hanging on this stud. I have to hold it into the housing because it falls out, and hold it into the housing as I'm pushing the housing into the block. It's the head, not the block. But you tell me, is this thing going to leak? Well, you want to take bets right now? Do you want to know the cherry on top to this whole little shit cupcake I'm working with here? That bolt down there. Yeah, that's how you put this down. I guess you're supposed to remove the EGR pipe. And you have, if you don't want to remove the EGR pipe and these sensors, you have this much room. So I'm going to be here for about an hour and a half. Okay, that's finally back together. I ended up tightening the top one first so that I could just tighten the bottom one with my fingers. I really hope I didn't pinch the O-ring, but there's only one way to find out. So everything's all connected, and then I've got the O2 sensor wiring job that I am clearly very, very, very proud of. That's hooked up. I have the fans hooked up, and I got this genius bracket that I invented hooked up. And I was just about to hook up the alternator cable when I saw this. So this is going to need a little bit more work. I think I'm going to wrap this in some conduit and a lot more tape. So this was starting to feel really encouraging. I got this whole side done. I got the charge cable hooked up. I've got the belts on. All the accessories are on. This was looking really nice. Got the cruise control module on. I just have to put the vacuum line to the intake manifold once that's ready to go. Really, really starting to feel like I'm on the downhill. Things are getting easier. I'm feeling much more confident. I'm feeling much happier. And then I go to do a simple, stupid thing. I put this cam angle sensor on, and guess what happens? Womp womp. I strip it out. So this actually goes all the way through. So worst case scenario, I'm just going to drill this stupid thing out, put a nut on the other side. I don't even feel like rethreading that. Maybe I'll do that some other day. But then I go to put the bolt that's underneath this stupid thing on, and it falls. And guess where it falls? There it is. It falls down there. Again. You know, some days you just have to turn around and walk away and come back another day. And I'm afraid that's going to be me today. All right, well, actually, it's been a couple of days. I took this opportunity to clean up around here a little bit, just so that this garage is a nicer place to be. And I got a new tool for fetching that stupid bolt out the back of my engine bay. Let's give this a try. All right. All right, magnet on a stick. Let's do this. The magnet's a little big, but I did get it in there. I think I got it. I think I got it. Yeah, I got it. Got it. All right, so now all I have to do is bring this thing out. And are you kidding me? You had one job. I can't even see it now. I can't even see it now. Well, at the end of the day, it's just a bolt. I tried. I did my best, but it's just a bolt. So I'm just going to get another one from my toolbox, and my car will just continue collecting bolts beneath the speed sensor. Well, unfortunately, I was unable to find all 4 spacers for the fuel injector rail. So while I wait for the one that I am missing, let's turn our attention over to the stereo. Now it's a little dark, so excuse me for that. But in here you see I've already ripped everything apart, and I've removed the battery and removed the trunk deck and started to get to work on some of the wiring. So I'm not looking to do a full refactor here. All I really want to accomplish is to remove some of the unused stuff, clean up the wiring a little bit, at least what I can expose. And you see here I have removed this harness that was going to nowhere, was not connected to anything. It used to be related to an alarm system that I took out a long time ago. And all I really did was I cut the wires back, and they're going to terminate underneath the seat instead of inside the trunk, because I don't want to gut my interior right now. When I do gut my interior, I will remove that harness entirely, but until then, it's just going to sit there. You see the speaker wires. I had to extend the output for the front speakers. That is a little bit ghetto because I've twisted and taped. It's been twisted and taped for decades now, so I don't think it's going to cause any problems, because it would have by now. And if there are any problems, well, that's a low voltage system anyway. It's not like I'm going to set the car on fire. At least, I really don't think I will, because I've already set my car on fire, and it wasn't from that. And then once we get everything all back together, we're going to tune the stereo, and I'm going to show you my process to doing that. The first thing I did after reinstalling the battery was to test the trunk solenoid. And it turns out the trunk solenoid is dead. No combination of things that I've tried have worked so far, so the next thing I'm going to do is remove it and bench test it and see if it is in fact dead. So this time I connected the ground and I directly jumped the trunk popper to the battery, and the trunk popper did jump. So the trunk popper itself is fine. There's something going on, obviously, between the trunk popper, the relay, and the switch itself in the front of the car, which kind of sucks because that's a lot of wire. but we're going to have to figure this out. I tested the relay, and it seems the relay is just fine. Uh, I, st I started by testing the wire that runs from the relay to the trunk popper. That moved the trunk popper. And then I put the fuse back into the main power line, and I tested the switch connection. The switch connection popped the relay and popped the trunk popper. So that is all working. There is something going on at the switch, which is in the front of the car. That's a real bummer, but I think I'm going to continue putting the stereo back together. And then once that's done, I'll move on to checking out what's going on with that switch. Just in case you're wondering, yes, this is a pain in the ass. This is a huge pain in the ass. It's especially painful when you do things like forget RCA cables underneath the board. You have to pick it up and try not to touch the battery terminal to the strut bar. And of course, I didn't label any of this, so I'm just kind of guessing as to where it's supposed to go. But why do I do it? Well, aside from being an idiot, this is a relic of my past. And yes, I was an idiot in my past, obviously. But back in, what, 2000, 2002, 2003, car stereos weren't that good. You know, today, any modern car has a better stereo than anything that I'll put in this thing. And of course, my home stereo, well, I've got a kick-ass 5.1 clip surround sound at home, so my office can just destroy anything this car will put out. But at the time, this was an amazing stereo. It sounded great. And in fact, before I had split the subwoofers, I had both subwoofers in a single box in the middle of the trunk pointed towards the back of the car. And that actually turned this entire trunk into a speaker box because the sound would come out of the subwoofers, bounce off of the back of the car, and reflect back out. It sounded awesome inside the car when there was heavy bass hits. And since I listen to a lot of heavy metal, it was like listening to a machine gun whenever you'd have a double kick drum going. So I keep it, even though it's a pain in the ass, I would never do it today. I keep it in this car because it's part of the experience of my past with this car. But seriously, don't do this. God, it is so stupid. And here it is. Subwoofers are installed, connected. I left the cover off of the centerpiece because I still have to figure out which RCA goes where. I have no idea, so it's really just a trial and error from here on out. The wires I more or less was able to figure out because it was pretty obvious which one of these was connected to the subwoofers. That's a very short run, and I can just visually look at them. And it doesn't really matter which ones are left and right. You can just swap the RCAs, and it's not a problem. But for the front and rear, I had to just, first of all, remember that this was the rear, and this was the front, because this is the wires that I twisted and taped underneath the board there. So once I remembered that, it was pretty easy to line up. I was actually really nice to myself. Thank you, previous self, for doing this, because it made this a whole lot easier to know what was going to go where and in what order. It's one of the things I hate about these amplifiers is that the labels for them are way down here. And that's really hard to read because you have to, like, you know, break your neck getting down there. So that's a pain in the ass. But aside from that, this is all hooked up and we are ready to test the stereo. Before we get into tuning this car stereo, I have a very important message for the overlords at YouTube. I have permission to play the music we are about to hear. The music we're about to hear is from a band called Desecrate, and I have explicit permission from Hakan Envig. He is one of my best friends. I go up to his house every weekend to watch Star Trek with him and his family. I told him exactly how I intend to use his music. He is completely cool with it. If you hit me with copyright, you are doing something wrong. Okay? I've seen this happen with YouTube musicians out there. They're constantly having to battle this copyright BS on YouTube. Just because you're allowed to cover music. You know, they're playing covers of music. They're reacting to other musicians, and they're constantly battling this copyright thing. Do not silence me. Do not silence my video. This is used with permission. This is used with permission. This is used with permission. All right, with that out of the way, let's start tuning the car stereo. The first thing I have to do is I have to turn it on, see if anything comes out of it. So first we're gonna go to auxiliary because I have kind of a janky setup. I actually have a really old stereo. It's probably about 12-ish years old, and I actually have a wired remote. The head unit is in the trunk, and this came before stereos came out of the box with Bluetooth. So it has an auxiliary out, and I have the auxiliary out running to a Bluetooth receiver in the front of the car here. So I switch it over to auxiliary, and then I turn on the receiver.
Bluetooth mode. Connected.
Hey, connected. Cool. So something's happening. We're getting sound. That's a good sign. It actually sounds pretty good, even with the subwoofers not tuned. Usually, when I do this, I start with Metallica's and Justice for All, just because it has a really nice separation of the kick drums, so I can really tune in the power on the subwoofers. But obviously, I'm not best friends with Lars Ulrich. I did meet him once, though. So first thing I need to do is remove the bass boost from the head unit. So now the next thing we need to do, we're going to go handheld so that I can figure out what speaker is going where. First, we're going to start with driver's side front. So let's get that set up over here. Oh yeah, it's definitely backwards. So I switched it over to left and all the music went to the right. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. See what a pain in the ass this is? There we go. Did I get lucky with the left and right? I did. What about the front and rear? Nope. I gotta switch the front and rear. Okay. Yes! Now that we've got the sound coming out and going to where it's supposed to go, you gotta make the sound good. So I don't like to make the adjustments on the head unit itself because every time I disconnect the battery, I'll have to do it all over again. Really want to get it tuned from the amplifiers. That way they're set mechanically and I never have to change them again. All right, so what do we have here? Punch EQ. This is for the speakers, so that's at 0. We don't care. Gain is good. Gain is good. 4 channel. Crossover high pass. crossover high pass. That's about as good as we can get in terms of dialing it in. I do want some more gain in the subwoofers though. I have this really cool knob that I can turn up and down on the fly without using the car stereo. And I think I want to use that. So that means I need to bring up the gain a little bit on this here. Oh, this has better bass. Could immediately hear it's kicking harder. So we're going to punch EQ, infrasonic, just gonna bring up the gain. If I can get the screwdriver. Yeah, I can. So I want a little bit more. Actually, right now the knob is turned up to max, so I want more available than I actually want to hear. This is actually this knob right here. I'll bring it down. That's nothing. That's pretty good. Awesome. So that's going to wrap it up for this week's video. Kind of a bummer that I wasn't able to get this car out on the road, but that's okay. That's how it goes sometimes. And as a nice bonus, we were able to get the car stereo working. It's something I wanted to do anyway, because if I'm going to go across 300,000 miles, I want my stereo to be working. It's part of the journey of this car. It's part of the story that I have to tell you guys. So it's just so cool that I was able to make that happen. Speaking of music, thank you so much to my friend Hawk and the band Desecrate. Thank you so much for letting me use your music. I do like your music, by the way. This is my jam. This is actually how I got to know the guy. Thank you for watching my videos. If you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, comment. And if you don't like what you see, maybe you're a fan of opera. Even still, I want to know about it. Leave a comment in the description down below. Let's talk some music. I love music. I love music of all types. I'm not just a metalhead. Primarily a metalhead, though. If you want to talk metal, let's talk metal. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.